All right, ready to dive deep. Today, it's all about those alliances the U.S. built in East Asia after World War II.
Like a spider web with the U.S. right there in the
That's
center.
pulling all the strings, and we're using Victor Dicha's article, Power Play, as our guide.
What's so interesting is he argues that the U.S., they deliberately went a totally different route in Asia than they did with NATO in Europe.
Totally.
And most of the usual explanations for that difference, they don't quite add up.
Yeah, like geopolitics or cultural differences.
Exactly. Cha says it boils down to control.
Even more so than just defense.
Exactly.
So, yeah, obviously the U.S. was worried about communism, right?
Of course.
But they were also kind of nervous about their own allies. Like, what if those allies dragged them into wars they didn't want?
Oh, yeah. And that applied to basically everyone. Taiwan, South Korea, even Japan.
Okay, so let's break this down. Let's start with Taiwan and Chiang Kai-shek.
Oh, that guy. He was laser focused on retaking mainland China.
Yeah, he wanted it back.
He even came up with, these wild invasion plans.
Oh, really?
Involving U.S. troops, no less.
Wow. So how did the U.S. handle that? I mean,
So picture this. The U.S. basically puts Chiang on a leash.
okay.
They stationed the 7th Fleet right there in the Taiwan Strait.
Which, yeah, protected Taiwan from attack, but
But there's that but. It also very cleverly kept Chiang from launching any attacks of his own on the mainland.
so they're basically playing both sides, containing them both at the same
They're
time.
very strategic.
Very super strategic.
And get this. In 1954, they signed the Mutual Defense Treaty with Taiwan.
Which you'd think would embolden Chiang.
Yeah, you'd think so, like a blank check. But hold on, here's the real power play. There was a secret minute in that treaty,
A secret mania.
giving the U.S. veto power over Taiwan's use of force.
Whoa, so they needed permission from the U.S. before doing anything.
Imagine that. You can't even defend yourself without Uncle Sam saying it's okay.
That's wild.
Even their plans for if China attacked Taiwan, there was a wait-and-see phase.
Wait and see.
Yeah, they'd first figure out if Chiang had provoked it before getting involved.
Wow, talk about control.
Right. It wasn't just about protecting Taiwan. It was about making sure Chiang stayed in line.
Okay, so Taiwan, check. But what about South Korea?
South Korea.
Ah,
Enter Syngman Rhee. He was also itching for a fight.
another one.
Totally against the Korean War armistice. Even released prisoners of war.
Seriously.
Trying to tank the peace talks.
He sounds like a handful. How did the U.S. manage him?
Well, they used a mix of, rewards and punishments. Threatened to withdraw support from the UN command.
Which would have been devastating.
Exactly. No more backup. But they also got clever with the aid they gave.
Oh, interesting.
They held back on offensive weapons. Tanks, jets, that sort of thing.
So they were basically controlling his military.
Right. And, get this, the U.S. kept operational command of all South Korean forces.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they basically ran the South Korean military.
That is intense.
That shows how far they were willing to go to keep Rhee under control.
Okay, this power play theme is definitely emerging. But Japan's a different story, right?
True. Japan was, well, not exactly looking for a fight after World War II.
Yeah, understandably.
But the U.S., they knew Japan could become a major power again.
They definitely had that potential.
And they wanted to shape how that happened. They had a few options. One was to just keep Japan permanently weak.
Like totally sidelined.
Yeah, some folks, like MacArthur, liked that idea.
But that seems a bit harsh, you know?
Right. Another option was rapid rearmament.
Like turning them back into a military powerhouse overnight.
Exactly. But that would have freaked out the rest of Asia.
Yeah, probably not the best look after World War II.
Right. So what did they do?
Yeah, what was the middle ground?
They went with what Cha calls controlled reintegration.
Controlled reintegration.
Build Japan up, but keep them on a tight leash.
Gotcha. So how did they pull that off?
First, a generous peace treaty. No hard feelings, right?
Smart move. Start things off on the right foot.
Exactly. Then came the 1951 Security Treaty. Basically legitimized the U.S. military presence in Japan.
Okay.
And they bypassed any multilateral stuff. Dealt directly with Japan. Heavily influenced their domestic politics.
Through aid, I'm guessing.
Aid, yeah, and even some, shall we say, CIA activities.
So some behind-the-scenes maneuvering.
Oh, yeah. Dulles even wrote the Yoshida Letter.
Yoshida Letter.
Which basically forced Japan to promise they wouldn't make any deals with Communist China.
They were controlling their foreign policy, too.
Totally. And what was the end result? The Yoshida Doctrine. Japan focuses on economic development. The U.S. handles security. Pretty clever, right?
Super clever. Kept Japan firmly in the U.S. orbit.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've seen how the U.S. used these bilateral agreements to exert control over Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan. But why this approach in the first place? Why not a big multilateral alliance like NATO?
Well, the U.S., they were the big dog militarily.
Top dogs for sure.
Didn't need help with defense. Plus, Korea had already shown they were willing to use force.
Yeah, they weren't afraid to flex their muscles.
But, and this is a big but, they were terrified of getting pulled into a war they didn't want.
Especially with the whole domino theory thing.
Oh, yeah. If one country fell to communism, the whole region might follow.
So, control their allies. No accidental domino tipping.
Exactly. And bilateral agreements. Those gave them maximum control. They called the shots. No other countries ganging up on them.
This is making me rethink how alliances really work. It's not always about shared goals.
Right.
Sometimes it's about one side wanting to be in charge.
That's a huge takeaway from Che's work. And it explains why Asia looks so different from Europe in terms of security.
Okay, so the U.S. built this web of alliances, all about control, minimizing risk. But what about the long-term consequences? Did this approach actually backfire? Like, did it hurt regional cooperation, especially for Japan?
That's a great question and something we'll dig into when we come back. Because this power play strategy, it had some unexpected side effects.
Okay, this is blowing my mind already. I can't wait to see what else we uncover. Okay, so we've been talking about how the U.S. basically ran the show in East Asia after World War II. You know, this whole power play thing, controlling their allies and all that. But it sounds like that approach maybe had a downside.
Oh, definitely. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. While they achieved their short-term goals, there were some, shall we say, long-term consequences, especially for Japan.
Let's talk about that. I mean, Japan was obviously the bad guy in World War II.
Exactly. A lot of baggage there, a lot of tension with their neighbors.
Yeah, tons of resentment.
And the thing is, the U.S., in their focus on, keeping Japan's military in check, they kind of accidentally made it harder for Japan to really reconcile with those neighbors.
Okay, so how did that happen?
Well, think about it. The U.S. swooped in and provided Japan with pretty much everything they needed. Security, economic aid, the whole package.
So they were kind of shielded.
Exactly. Shielded from having to really face the music, so to speak. Engage in some serious diplomacy, apologize, make amends.
They were kind of stuck in this weird limbo.
Yeah, like not fully integrated into Asia, but not fully independent either.
Wow, that's a great way to put it.
And this has had a real impact on Japan's foreign policy even today.
Like how? Give me an example.
Well, think about Japan's efforts to get a permanent seat on the UN Security Council.
Oh, right. They've been pushing for that forever.
They have. But they face a lot of pushback.
Yeah, they do.
And a lot of that comes from their Asian neighbors, the ones who still remember World War II very vividly.
Yeah, makes sense.
So there's unresolved historical issues. They still cast a long shadow.
So it's like, even though the U.S.'s power play stabilized things in the short term, it maybe actually prevented deeper cooperation, genuine reconciliation in the long run.
It's a classic case of unintended consequences, Even well-intentioned policies can have these ripple effects.
Okay, so now let's fast forward a bit. Bring China into the mix.
Ah, yes. China. The game changer.
How does China's rise challenge this whole power play dynamic that the U.S. built?
Well, for decades, the U.S. was the only real power in East Asia.
The undisputed top dog.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Calling all the shots. But China, with their economic and military growth, they've shifted the balance. Big time.
And their interests don't exactly line up with the U.S.'s, right?
You got it. We're seeing it play out already. The South China Sea disputes, trade wars, ideological clashes.
Yeah, things are getting tense.
It's a multipolar world now. Power's more spread out, less predictable.
Okay, so can the U.S. still maintain that same level of control they had before? Is the power play still viable?
It's definitely getting harder.
I bet.
China's actively trying to reshape things,
Okay.
They want a system that benefits them.
What are they doing to make that happen?
We're using all sorts of tools, economic incentives, investments, think Belt and Road.
Right.
But also, they're military. They're modernizing fast, projecting power, challenging the U.S.
So carrots A&D sticks.
Exactly. Leverage.
So is China trying to push the U.S. out completely? Are we heading for a showdown?
I don't think it's that simple. I mean, yes, China's asserting themselves.
Definitely.
But they're also pragmatic. A big war with the U.S. Nobody wins that.
So it's more about competition.
Yeah, they want a bigger piece of the pie. More influence. More say. But kicking the U.S. out completely. Not necessarily.
And this puts other countries in a really awkward position.
Totally. Think South Korea, the Philippines, even Japan.
Yeah, longtime U.S. allies.
Right. But now they have China right there, offering economic opportunities and more security guarantees of their own.
So what do? Who do they side with?
That's the million-dollar question. It's a balancing act.
A high wire act, it
Yeah,
sounds like.
exactly. And each country's going to have to figure out their own path. Some might try to play both sides. Others might have to pick a team.
And there's a lot of room for error.
Oh, tons.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this new era in East Asia so interesting, But also a little scary. The old rules are gone. The future is uncertain.
So there's no clear winner in this power play.
Not yet, anyway. It's more like a complicated dance.
Okay, I like that. A dance.
Everyone's trying to figure out their steps, how to survive, how to thrive.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. We've covered so much ground. The U.S. alliance system, China's rise.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And it seems like Asia is, well, it's in for some major changes.
Definitely. And the decisions made in the next few years, they're going to have huge consequences, way beyond Asia even.
So it's a story that's still being written.
Absolutely. And we're all going to be watching to see how it ends.
Okay, so we're back. And we've been talking about this whole power play dynamic in Asia. But now things are changing. China's on the rise. So where does that leave us? Is China basically going to try to become the new puppet master, pulling all the strings like the U.S. did?
Well, it's easy to think that way, I mean, they're definitely building up their own influence. Look at their investments, those massive infrastructure projects like the Belt and Road Initiative, the diplomacy they're doing.
Yeah, they're not exactly being subtle about it.
Right. And it creates this, web of interdependence. Countries become reliant on them, which gives China leverage.
Leverage, yeah. Not to mention their military, which is getting stronger all the time.
Oh, yeah, they've got the carrots and the sticks now. Lots of ways to influence things.
So are they actively trying to kick the U.S. out? Is that what we're headed towards? Some kind of big showdown in the Pacific?
It's complicated. I mean, yeah, they're assertive, but they're not stupid. They know a big war with the U.S. would be a disaster for everyone.
Okay, so not a full-on conflict, but definitely competition.
Right. They want to change things, make the system benefit them more, have more say. But completely replace the U.S., I don't think that's the goal. It's more about shifting the power balance, creating a multipolar world where they're the big guy.
And that puts a lot of other countries in a really tough position.
Like South Korea, the Philippines, even Japan.
They've been U.S. allies for so long.
Exactly. Relying on the U.S. for security. But now they've got China right there, offering economic opportunities and increasingly, security guarantees as well.
Talk about a rock in a hard place.
It really is fascinating. The very system the U.S. built to control things is now facing this challenge from this new power. The U.S. made all these countries dependent on them, and now that dependence is being tested.
So how do those countries even navigate that? Stick with the U.S. or try to, accommodate China?
There are no easy answers. It's really a balancing act, and each country is going to have to find its own way. Some might try to play both sides, keep everyone happy, but others might have to choose, align more with one or the other.
It sounds like a recipe for disaster, honestly.
Oh, there's definitely a lot of room for things to go wrong, and that's what makes this whole situation so interesting, and a bit scary. The old playbook doesn't work anymore, and nobody knows what's going to happen next.
So no clear winner in this power play?
Not right now. It's more like a really intense dance.
Okay, I like that analogy. A dance.
Yeah, where everyone's trying to figure out their steps, trying to survive, and hopefully come out on top.
Well, this has been a wild ride. We've gone from the early days of the U.S. alliance system all the way to the rise of China, and it sounds like Asia's in for a pretty bumpy ride.
Oh, yeah. Big changes are coming. And the choices these countries make, they're going to have ripple effects all over the world. It's a story that's still being written,
And we'll all be watching to see what happens next. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into power play in Asia. We hope you learned something new and that you'll keep thinking about these really important issues.
And until next time, keep learning.